Picture this. You're stepping onto the pitch, and staring back at you is the most physically dominant striker in football history. We're talking unstoppable speed, sheer brute strength, and that legendary 99 shot power from the old video games. Yeah, you know exactly who I'm talking about. During his peak at Inter Milan, Adriano was swatting away world-class defenders like they were literally nothing. Nobody could tackle him. So where exactly does a peak that terrifying rank among football's all-time greats? It's a debate fans love to have, but welcome to this explainer because today we're going way past the highlight reels. We're going to reframe a career that usually gets labeled as a tragedy or a massive waste of talent and show you what it really was, a deeply human, desperate pursuit of peace. I mean, just try to imagine carrying the weight of the whole world, calling you a generational waste. Adriano actually wrote a letter back to his community, his favela in Brazil, and it contains this incredibly stark, self-reflective confession. He literally wrote, "Football's biggest waste, me." He knows what people say. He feels that heavy stigma. But as we dig into his story today, keep those words in mind. Because what the outside world so easily writes off as a waste, Adriano ultimately calls survival. Section 1. The Emperor of Milan. The unstoppable force at Inter. Let's get right into it. Okay, before we can even try to understand the fall, we have to look at the sheer height of the mountain this guy was standing on. Back in the early 2000s, Adriano wasn't just a player, he was an absolute phenomenon. He earned the nickname L'Imperatore, the Emperor, and believe me, he earned it. 74 goals in 177 matches for Inter Milan. He basically single-handedly carried Brazil to the 2004 Copa America title, hitting a crazy 93rd minute equalizer in the final. People were calling him this terrifying hybrid of Zlatan Ibrahimovic and the Brazilian Ronaldo. And speaking of Zlatan, when Ibrahimovic arrived at Inter, he marched straight up to the club president and demanded to play alongside Adriano. Zlatan, a guy not exactly known for his humility, called him a pure animal. To get that kind of reverence from Zlatan, that tells you everything. He was a guy who could shoot from anywhere, totally untackleable, standing at the absolute summit of world football. Section 2. A devastating loss. The turning point. But life can just pivot in a terrible instant. Right at the exact moment he was cementing himself as the best striker on the planet, his world totally shattered. The whiplash of that summer of 2004 it's hard to wrap your head around. In July, he's lifting the Copa America trophy, top scorer, on top of the world. Then, just days later in August, he gets a phone call from Brazil. His dad, Marinho, his absolute rock, his hero, the guy who shaped his entire life, had suddenly passed away from a heart attack. He was only 44 years old. Javier Zanetti, his teammate, remembers the exact agonizing moment. He watched Adriano throw his phone down, screaming and crying, trapped in an absolute nightmare. Zanetti still calls his inability to pull Adriano out of that ensuing darkness the single biggest defeat of his entire career. Section 3. The invisible battle. Untreated depression in the spotlight. That phone call left this massive, gaping void. Think about it. He's a 22-year-old kid, completely isolated in Europe, miles away from his family, with the pressure of the entire footballing world resting squarely on his shoulders. What followed was a brutal, invisible battle with untreated depression, playing out under the brightest spotlights imaginable. His own words are absolutely chilling. He said, "I only felt happy when I was drinking. I drank everything I could get my hands on: wine, whiskey, vodka, beer. Lots of beer." He was using alcohol just to forcefully numb the intense loneliness and pain, trying desperately to escape a reality that had just become way too painful to handle alone. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive gap between what we saw and what was really happening behind closed doors. The public was fed this completely sanitized story. If you read Inter Milan's press releases at the time, you'd think, oh, he's just dealing with some unfortunate muscular problems or lingering injuries. They were doing everything in their power to shield him from the media. But the reality? It was so much darker. Adriano was literally showing up to morning training completely drunk. The medical staff would have to quickly usher him away to the infirmary just to let him sleep it off out of sight. Inter Milan was this incredibly powerful institution, but they were tragically powerless against his overwhelming depression. Which brings us to this staggering number, 5. That's it. 5 league goals for the entire 2006-2007 Serie A season. For a guy of his earth-shattering caliber, someone who casually dropped 16 or 13 goals in previous seasons while overpowering defenders at will, this was a catastrophic collapse. Fans were baffled. The media was tearing into his work rate, but they were entirely missing the core issue. That single digit is a visual representation of how untreated mental health directly decimated his physical output. The emperor was losing his empire. Not because he forgot how to play, not because he lost his talent, but because he was profoundly unwell and suffering in total silence. Section 4. Escaping the spotlight, searching for peace. The grief, the media scrutiny, the suffocating pressure, it all just compounded into something unbearable. The cold, unforgiving environment of European football finally broke his ability to function. He desperately needed an out. And honestly, the contrast between his two worlds couldn't be starker. In Milan, he spent his first Christmas freezing, dark, and profoundly lonely. He actually went to Clarence Seedorf's house for this beautiful, luxurious dinner, but left early just to go back to an empty apartment. He called his family in Brazil, crying himself to sleep on the couch while downing a bottle of vodka alone. Now, flip that and look at his childhood favela, Vila Cruzeiro. Genuine warmth, loud samba music echoing in the streets, neighbors sharing whatever food they had, playing dominoes barefoot in the alleys. It was the literal antithesis of the crushing isolation he felt every single day in Italy. Section 5. Peace in the favela, returning to the source. So he made a move that left the sporting world absolutely speechless. He walked away. He left massive multi-million euro contracts sitting right there on the table, escaped the relentless Italian paparazzi, and went straight into hiding in Vila Cruzeiro. And why? Because the primary rule of the favela was absolute loyalty. The police literally thought he'd been kidnapped. The international media declared he had completely lost his mind. But the truth was profoundly simple. He knew nobody in his community would ever snitch on him to the press. He traded those millions just for the freedom to walk barefoot, shirtless, sit on a curb, and remember his true essence. And you know what? Going back stabilized his mental health. Beautifully, it actually allowed for one last incredible chapter on the pitch. Reunited with his boyhood club Flamengo, he reclaimed his lost joy, scored 19 goals, and dramatically led them straight to the 2009 domestic title. He proved once and for all that the talent never left. It just needed a healthy, happy human being behind it. The world loved to construct this dark, sensationalized narrative that going back to the favela was some tragic downfall into crime and ruin. But Adriano hits the nail on the head himself. He tells us directly, "I didn't do it because of drinking or women, much less because of drugs. It was for freedom. It was because I wanted peace. I wanted to live." So the crucial point here is that it wasn't a tragic collapse. It was a deliberate, totally necessary rescue mission. It was the only way he could save himself and finally become human again. We started this whole thing by asking where his peak ranks among the all-time greats, and we acknowledge that a lot of people still call his career a profound waste. But I really want to leave you with this. Is walking away from a legendary football career truly a waste if it means saving your own life? Adriano traded the golden throne of Milan for a simple plastic chair in Vila Cruzeiro, and in doing so, he found the peace he so desperately needed to survive. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this gives you a completely new perspective on the complex man behind the myth. Let that final question sit with you for a while, and I'll see you next time.